So, Tony, before I have a question I want to ask you about an ayahuasca monologue that you did. But before we go there, I know that people are wondering, how can I get his music? So, can you tell us real quick, what's the best way to go and find your new album or to just to get acquainted with your music?
Most people are listening on Spotify, but my music is available on all platforms. But if you go to Spotify, just Tony Moss, my full name, and obviously my pictures. Ironically and kind of beautifully, there's another Tony Moss who's also a musician. Um, but my avatar looks like me, so you'll know you'll found me when you get there.
And if you're
Yeah, and
listening to
also
this,
on my okay, well, on my website, everything is listed there, which is just my name, TonyMoss.me, M-E.
perfect. If you're listening to this on audio, Tony Moss is a beautiful black man with dreadlocks. So that's the Tony Moss that you want to see when you go to Spotify. But I recommend you go to his Bandcamp site so you can pay for his music, um, if
Yeah,
that's
but a
possible.
word about that. You mentioned that earlier. This is not a plug for me. It's just something to remind people of, because we're having this conversation all the time in the music industry. In a lot of ways, the big transition in the music industry has been amazing for musicians because all of these tools are available, and you no longer need record labels to produce good music and get it out there. At the same time, it's made it much more difficult for artists to make money because everyone's listening for free, and those streaming platforms aren't paying artists much. So I just always encourage people, any song that you actually like, that you really resonate with, yes, listen to it streaming, but also go and pay the 99 cents or whatever it is, sometimes more, you can volunteer. It's not only just supporting the artist, it's letting them know that people care enough about what they're doing to kind of encourage them to keep doing it.
Yes, 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 yes. It's a reciprocity. And I think if we
So,
view ourselves in reciprocity with artists, with musicians, they're not just out there somewhere producing, but they are producing with
yeah,
us.
absolutely. Very much so. Yeah.
Mm. So, okay, one of the reasons why I kind of fell in love with you is because I listened to your ayahuasca monologue on YouTube,
Mm,
and in it, you told the story of meeting your father while you were on a plant
yes.
journey. And I wonder if you could talk maybe a little bit about that, if that feels good to you, but also about
Sure.
the the power or how it helps one to connect with this ancestry or to, repair things with those who came before
Yeah.
us.
So first of all, for early on, 'cause I've been doing this now like half my life, the indigenous people that I worked with would often say things that basically translated to, we carry our ancestors within us. And I kind of thought that was metaphoric. Um, and then, of course, in ceremonial work or psychedelic, psychotherapeutic work, you do have these experiences of ancestors. Lo and behold, years later, I'll skip all the details. Research shows that it's absolutely true. We carry the the pain and sufferings, the traumas, the physical health challenges that our ancestors experienced. We do carry them in our DNA. So they were absolutely right. A more practical way to look at it is if you think of each of us inheriting the baggage of our ancestors, particular ways of being, worldviews, relationships with women, family, whatever it is, you clear that baggage up in your lifetime and it doesn't move forward. So, in that sense, we say you are helping to heal your ancestral lineage forwards and backwards. Backwards because you clear it up within yourself, right? You're giving the ancestral trauma a place to be met and to be processed and healed. And those tendencies don't go forward because you've taken care of it, right? It's like, I don't need to abuse my partner or children or other people based on these unconscious behaviors that I inherited or certain cultural conditionings. I now recognize that that's what it is, and I can move in the world in a different way, right? So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road of that. Me personally, what happened was I was doing an ayahuasca ceremony in the desert with a group that I was working with a lot at the time. And we were in a circle, and I noticed that in my peripheral, I could see someone standing there. And at some point, it dawned on me that everybody that was in this ceremony was accounted for. I'm like, wait, who is this person? And I looked over and I realized it was my father, who had passed away some 5 years earlier. And basically, the conversation went something like, now that I have your attention, can we have a talk? So I asked for permission to leave the group, um, because you have to stay within the group. But they knew who I was, and they said, yeah, just make sure that we can see you. So I kind of walk off a distance into the desert. And my father basically says, I wanted to let you know that the reason that I caused you so much pain and suffering. And as he was speaking, I went into a visionary state of seeing ancestral peoples. Visually, I would say it looked like people from Africa running through fields being chased by other people. And that became kind of this montage of moving into those people coming to to the United States, basically as slaves, watching their hardships, and then seeing that the same kind of pain and suffering that they endured in terms of the way that unacceptable behavior was being handled through violence, that they adopted that as a way of raising their own children and a way of interacting with the world. And then my grandfather showed up on my mother's side and my father's father. And basically what they were showing me was um, what the way that we responded to you growing up was not cool. We just want you to understand that we were doing the best we could. And this is why we were doing it that way. And in that, I said each of their names out loud one at a time and basically said, I forgive you. And they kind of vanished and moved on. And the interesting thing was my father did not vanish and move on. He said, by the way, one more thing. He said, all these relationships that you've been in the past, you actually weren't in relationships with your partners. You were in relationship with me. And it was a stunning revelatory moment, literally. I was like riveted because it felt like somehow my entire life came into focus and made sense in that moment because what was being shared was true. And I was able to put all of my past relationships into context of me either avoiding or seeking love and acceptance and validation from people because I felt like that's what I was seeking from my father. It seems like psychotherapy 101, but not when it's real and it's a somatic, visceral experience, it's different. So I was left with this feeling of like, oh my goodness, like how do I move forward with the world? Because now for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm standing on the planet as an authentic, sovereign, free human being that is able to move through the world from my own volition and not from a reactionary place to my own past conditioning. Changed everything. Yeah. It was like I needed to kind of like reinvent how I was going to move forward from that moment on. And I did. Yeah.
Mm, wow. And I did, you said your grandfathers wanted you to say their names out loud and say, I forgive you. What did you say?
Yeah. Well, it just came intuitively to me. Um, I addressed each one of them because I just knew it was kind of one of these moments that calls you to rise to the occasion, to rise to the moment. And I intuitively knew what needed to happen, you know. And I said one at a time, I said their names, and I said, I acknowledge what it is that you shared with me in this moment, and I forgive you. I now understand, and I forgive you. And it was not something that they did, but it was a somatic kind of feeling that was met, and in that they were able to move on. It was like they dissipated, right? And
Yes.
my father received it too, but he had one more message for me. Yeah, and
Right.
that was really the big one.
Right. That was a real gift for you.
It was a huge gift, and it not only for the like I said earlier, it was a personal healing, and it was transpersonal in that I realized the power of the work that I had been doing, and it kind of cemented that I was going to commit myself to being able to offer this experience to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a little trick question. So back when you were in musical theater, because I know that you had a
Mhm.
career in musical theater,
Yeah.
I kind of want to hear some of the roles that you played, some of the but back when you were playing those roles, but you could tell us a couple of what you played, did you ever imagine that you would be Tony Moss, medicine music, ayahuasca, expanding consciousness as your life work?
Not a possibility at the time. It wasn't even a remote idea, right? I was on a trajectory, I thought, of fame, and I wanted my goal was to win a Tony Award. Funny enough, Tony Award, and that was within reach. I was told anyway that I was talented enough to do that. And an interesting thing happened right around the time that this is way prior to meeting ayahuasca. Um, the 20th anniversary of Earth Day was happening, and there were all these events planned for LA. And a friend of mine and I decided we were going, well, let's utilize our combined skills. He was a science teacher, actually a scientist, but we were both really involved in what was happening with Amazonia at the time and the destruction of the rainforest. So we basically, in a nutshell, wrote this half-hour rainforest musical that was going to tour these malls in Southern California and educate people on what was happening with rainforest. So this interesting, again, the way the universe works, very fascinating. I look back at this moment very often. I got contacted by this woman. Her name was Cheryl Baxter. She was like a very hot choreographer at the time. She was doing things like choreographing for like the Academy Awards. She was mounting this show, Sophisticated Ladies, that was going to do a European tour. And I'm like, this is it. And she said, I'm already familiar with your work. There's a lead role in this that you'd be perfect for. If you want to do it, it's yours. And I'm like, yes, it's just going to happen. And I'm going to get a Tony Award. So I'm all in. And then she gave me the dates. Yeah, but guess what? The date that they were going to leave was the same day that my Rainforest musical show was slated to open in
Oh,
Southern California. And I had this, kind of, yeah, it was this moment of, it was a juncture in my life, you know. Do I move forward with this musical theater career and the trajectory that it was going that I thought I wanted? Or do I continue with this commitment that I've made to this rainforest thing? And I said, hey, I've got this conflict. Can I call you back? And she said, yeah, but I need to know by, it was like 2 or 3 days. And let me tell you, it was an excruciating time period. But in the end, I just tapped in and I realized my life is now moving in a different direction. And I kind of felt that it was. And I had to call her back and I said, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity, but I've got this show opening and people are depending on me and I need to be there. She said, I fully understand. Here's the thing that's interesting. I was at a point in my career at that point where I hardly ever needed to audition. I had enough street cred that the phone would just ring every couple of weeks and I would get a job. I said no to that opportunity and the phone never rang again. I never got offered another job. Yeah. And it was okay. I never looked back. Uh, it was a tough time because I had to make a huge transition, but I knew that I had told the universe, so to speak, that I was ready to take on this next chapter of my life. And it actually wasn't going to be musical theater and quote unquote fame and, in the way that a young person views that. And, but here's it, ayahuasca comes along and I'm missing, I'm jumping forward many years. And lo and behold, the thing that I most love, music, came right hurling back into my life. And I realized, oh, I can do this thing that I also am here to do, but now in a different context and with a different intention.
hmm. Wow. So for all of
Yeah.
our artists, performing artists out there, wow, that is a very big step and a big risk you took when you said no to sophisticated
Particularly at that
ladies.
age, I think I might have been maybe like 28, 29 years old. So that's like, Saturn return time for people that,
Perfect.
cognize that. Yeah. And for some reason, I had the ability to cognize and recognize that I was at this juncture and that the choice that I was about to make either would have been okay, but I knew that the choice that I was about to make was going to put my life in a particular direction. And just every part of my being said, let go of the theater thing. This is not where your heart lies. It's where your ego lies at the moment, right? It's a trajectory of the story that you've been in up till now. But the deeper calling and to fulfill your deeper potential lied in this other path. And that turned out to be absolutely true.
Mm. Makes me think of I think it was Krishna Das who had an opportunity to tour with a rock and roll band, or he could have gone with Ram Dass to India for some, for some situation.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, and so he had to choose, and then he chose to follow Ram Dass to India, and he let go of the tour, and yeah, and of course he's made a beautiful, 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 unique contribution to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a song by a lot of people are familiar with Nako Nako Bear, he's called. And one of his lyrics I love so much, I quote all the time. He simply says, "Find your medicine and use it." And it's really profound, simply profound. You know, once a person kind of wakes up to, I say this kind of species awareness that there's a lot going on in the world, and you have this calling that somehow you want to participate and contribute. It doesn't always need to be some grand, I'm going to study and become a shaman, right? It's simply looking at your particular medicine. It's like find whatever that is and put it into service, you know? It might be that you're an herbalist, it might simply be that you maintain the job that you have, but how you interact with people. You be the person, and my friend Miranda would often say, be the person in the line at the post office that's not going postal. You know, like say hello to people, start a conversation. When you meet the teller, at the Trader Joe's, genuinely ask them, so how's your day going? Like, what's happening with you? Um, if your contribution is simply to carry a particular frequency of harmony and connection and validating people, and bringing love and joy into a situation, that's a medicine. So, and it might be that you do a podcast, right? Or in my case, make music that goes out to a lot of people. Um, I was at Burning Man once, and this interesting thing happened. A lot of magical things happened at Burning Man. And this little go-kart that was all electrified, with Christmas lights and stuff on it, I see it kind of coming towards us from a distance. And it's broadcasting this like, really cool disco music. But there's this voice kind of happening also coming out of it. And right as it passed, it was a woman's voice. And I never found out who she was. Somebody probably knows out there. And as it passed, she said, each of us has the ability to make another person feel worthy. Use this power and you can change the world. And like, bam, like that simple,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I hate to ask another question after that. But if people want to get more of you, Tony, again, tell us how we can find out more about you, hear more of your wisdom, grow with your music.
I am pretty much focused these days on the music itself. And occasionally, when they intrigue me, I'll do a podcast. Yours did certainly because of what you're about and just seeing your presence on Instagram. But whatever it is that I'm doing, I always announce through my link tree. I would say, either follow me on Instagram or look occasionally at tonymoss.me. Whatever it is I'm up to, I do post there so people kind of know what's happening. It's not something that I'm doing consistently because my focus at the moment is not being like a public figure and being out there. It's really focused more on the music. And I'm a very public, enthusiastic advocate for plant medicine and psychedelic work just because, I will say a word about that. There's this kind of like saying and almost joke in the world of ayahuasca and plant medicine work that um, one night in an ayahuasca ceremony, 10 years of psychotherapy can be 10 minutes, right, in a ceremony. And this is true, right? And it's why I'm an advocate for it. We're at a time when things are accelerated and never before in human history, yes, there have always been crises happening, but this is the first time that the actions that we are taking as a species can literally affect life on this planet. So we also need an accelerated response, right? An accelerated technology of transformation and healing and expansion of consciousness. And in an intentional setting with professional people that know what they're doing, plant medicines and psychedelics offer that, right? And an qualifier, of course, it is not for everybody. We all know that, right? But for people that are leaning towards and have access to it, I know from now 30 years experience that the vast majority of people that have at least in my experience, that have encountered and worked with things like ayahuasca have been on this accelerated path. You know, it doesn't eclipse the other work that you need to do of like mindfulness and meditation and other spiritual practices, including the Judeo-Christian religions, but it can accelerate and enhance and kind of like it's like adding octane fuel to whatever path you're on already, right? So that you can really dive in and fully receive and kind of cut through a lot of the noise of what's happening in contemporary society, and allows you to really take on your work in a way that is accelerated. And I would say, in a lot of ways, it empowers that work. In and of itself, it can be a path, right, of mindfulness, self-inquiry, and expansion. But it can also just be a powerful aid to whatever else you're working on. So that's one of the reasons I'm so committed to it.
Yes. So thank you, Tony Moss. Thank you for all of your
You're
work, all
very
of your
welcome.
music, all of your guiding of other people, and your own soul journey work with yourself and your lineage. We appreciate you. And we encourage everybody out there to check out Tony Moss's website, tonymoss.me, to find him on Instagram, to listen to the new album. And I want to know the name of that album. Is it Joy?
It is joy. Yeah. And it's kind of self-explanatory when listening to it. The album's not the first single has been released. Two or three will be released in the next couple of weeks, at least as we're recording. But probably within a month or so, the entire thing will be released. It's a process. Yeah.
Yes, of course, of course. So be on the lookout for Joy by Tony Moss. All right, until the next time, beautiful.